Yeah. LinkedIn's the main one, probably. All right, cool. So we'll get into this. So, thanks for having us and for coming out tonight. My name is Evan Gordon. I work for Motion Recruitment Partners. It's the parent company of JobSpring and Workbridge Associates, which are both IT staffing companies. Right. So we have offices all across the U.S., Canada, locally offices here in Philly. Right. So on a regular basis, we're working with folks like yourself, helping out your job search. Right. So tonight, myself and my colleague Kayla and Courtney are going to be talking to you about really this kind of overarching concept of creating a story, right? We're going to talk about developing your personal brand, right? So what that is, how do you define that, things you want to consider, promoting that, and we're going to get into some specifics regarding resume, like resume tips, kind of do's and don'ts. LinkedIn, right? So some things that you want to focus on with regards to your LinkedIn profiles. Kind of wrapping up with this acing the interview, right? So just some tips from an interview perspective, and then as Ed mentioned, we'll do like a Q&A at the end, right? There'll be some points along the way that are interactive, so feel free to interact when it's appropriate, if you will. But the general gist of this, and I guess really the point behind this is before you start your job search, right? It's really important to know really who you are, what your personal brand is, and then how you're going to essentially be portraying that throughout your various interview processes, right? Whether that's, how are you being found, right? Such as, resume and LinkedIn. How are you actually, portraying yourself throughout interview processes, and ultimately, the hope is this will help you guys if you're looking or at some point looking for a job, generate more interviews, right, that are appropriate for what you're ultimately looking for. And at the end of the day, ideally finding a job that, your dream job, right? So as we dive into this is interactive, right? This may or may not work. We'll see. The question to the crowd, if you wouldn't mind, you can text right up there, right to that number, and it will pop up here. But the question was, what word to you best describes your personal brand, right? If you can think about it, and you were to summarize that in one word, right? Not everybody all at once. Yeah. So while we're getting some text, for those that aren't texting, anything come to mind when you think about like what your brand means or how you define who you are? I mean, just the main area of expertise. Definitely. Yep. I would say that's definitely there, right? Your whatever your expertise may be, for sure. Yeah. Certs. Okay. Yep. Okay. There you go. Yep. Reliability. Cool. All super relevant, and as we'll get into, your brand is more than one word, obviously, right? But all these things obviously make up, who we are as people. And as we're going through interview processes and we're actually doing interviews, there we go, leadership, like that one, right? These are just important characteristics to keep in mind, right? Supportive, another good one. Confident, right? We know who that one was. There we go, right? And again, this is how we're going to be, really portraying ourselves as we move forward here. So, we saw a quote that we liked that essentially kind of sums this up here. But your brand is your reputation, right? It's what you're known for and how people actually experience you, right? So it's an interesting question to pose. People give us references, right, to check frequently, right? And references, again, I've done this for a long time. 99.9% of the time are really good because they're people that are going to have good things to say about you. How would that backdoor reference check go, right? So if a client were to call somebody that they knew in common, right, that maybe had worked with you or interacted with you at some point in the past, what would those people say, right? That those people would be able to give a really good example, right, of how they've experienced you, right? It could be that person was a good leader. It could be that person was supportive. It could be that person was an expert, right, in a certain technology. These are all things that we want to keep in mind, right, as we kind of run through, this process here of building our own personal brand. So let's talk about how do you define that, right? Because like I said, it's important to understand, really who you are and what you like to do and what your interests are as you kind of embark on this job search journey, if you will. So I think the important things to start with are really strengths, weaknesses. Not only is that a question that's super outdated, but oftentimes asked by many an HR person, right? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Like, yeah, people still actually ask that. It's good to know, right? It's good to know because, as you start to do things like develop a resume and build out your LinkedIn profile, you want to be obviously highlighting things that, in your opinion, are strengths of yours. You want people to be finding you based on what your core skills are, right? You're a VMware engineer. You want someone to look at your resume and be able to tell that instantly, right? Or your LinkedIn profile. You want to have the right SEO so people are actually finding you to be able to reach out to you, right? Weaknesses are what they are. I mean, everybody has them, right? Like that's a question, like I said, that will be asked. And, there's things that you're going to like to do. There's things that you're not going to like to do. And that's cool. It's just important to understand how you're going to communicate that, right? As you go through, interview processes. And lastly, it's passions. Like, what are you interested in, right? So when you're starting to look for a new position, it's important to understand really what's my motivation for looking for a new job. We'll kind of get into this, but is it compensation? That's part of it, but I would say nowadays that's probably less and less of someone's main motivator, right, for switching jobs. I mean, everybody wants to make as much money as possible, clearly, but there's a lot of other things that are super important, for folks. Again, which we'll get into here, but I think the second bullet point is really important too. What do you enjoy most about what you do, right? Because as you start looking for a position, right, as you start going down that journey, it's important to know what you actually want to do, right? Do you like systems administration and support? Do you like that function of your job? Do you like being hands-on? Do you like, the engineering aspect? Are you more interested in, architecture and design? Do you like leading teams? There's a whole variety of things that you can enjoy about your position, and there's things that you may not enjoy about your position, right? It's interesting from our perspective because we're frequently placing people that are looking to take that next step career-wise into management in some instances, and we're placing people sometimes that are managers. They're like, I'm fucking over this, and I want to be closer to the technology, right? So when you're starting your search, it's just important to really understand, what do you really enjoy and what are you really looking for, right? And that's going to help shape, your interview going forward here. This next point here, somebody actually once mentioned this to me, and they called it the airplane test, right? So if you're sitting on an airplane next to somebody that you don't know, and they turn to you and ask you, "So what do you do?" Can you explain that to somebody, right? Can you explain to somebody in layman's term what you do? Saying, "Oh yeah, I'm a network engineer." If they're not in IT, they're gonna have no idea what the hell you're talking about, right? This is very relevant because as you go through an interview process, oftentimes you're going to be interacting with technical folks, right? That might be peers. You can be talking to senior engineers or architects that are going to be super technical. You could be interacting with, IT management or leadership that are not technical. You're going to be interacting with HR people and recruiters and whole variety of different folks. So it's really important that you can actually articulate to these folks what you do, right? What you like about what you do, what you're looking to do, obviously in your next position. The technology piece is important, like I said, right? It should be very easy for somebody to come across your resume or your LinkedIn profile and very easily decipher what you do, right? And we need to know, again, we meaning you need to know what you do to be able to best put that out there, right? The goal is when you're looking for jobs to be found, right? You're going to apply to stuff, which is great. You want people to ideally find you too. You can hit positions from multiple angles there. The benefit of what people get from working with you, right? How are you to work with? I mean, everybody thinks that they're great to work with, probably. But being able to give actual examples of when you've worked in a team, when you've worked on a difficult project, whatever the case may be, right? Whether you've led projects, mentored folks, whatever the case may be, these are other things that are going to come up, right, as you're going through interview processes here. What makes me stand out? I mean, I think that's a big part of, your own personal brand, right? So what do you do personally to stand out from other people, right, to do what you do? This could be, are you involved in the community, like coming to things like this, right? Are you involved in, extracurricular training? Like, do you have a lab in your house that you tinker with, right? Are you involved and interested in, obtaining industry certifications, right, based on what technology you work with? Are you up to date with current events in tech and new technologies that are coming out? These are all things from a personal branding perspective that are going to allow you, right, to stand out from other folks that are ultimately interviewing for the same positions as you are. I knew that thing was going to fall off. And like I said, probably the most important thing is, save the best for last here, but what is the most important part for you, right, when you're looking for a new position? Um, Again, I think that, people's maybe initial answer sometimes is compensation, but the more that you think about, all right, what's my actual motivation for looking for a new job, right? Again, I think money is always somewhat involved, like I said before, right? Everybody wants to make as much as they possibly can, but what are you really interested in your next job? Is the commute really important, right? Is it work flexibility, work from home flexibility, hours flexibility? Is it work-life balance? Is it growth potential, right? Is it exposure to new technologies? I mean, there's a billion things that we can think about here. But like I said, before you start really embarking on your journey, let's say to look for a new position, it's really important to self-reflect and figure out, how am I going to market myself, right? Who are the appropriate people for me to get myself in front of? And what do I want, right? What kind of positions am I actually interested in? And then you can market yourself appropriately, right? Good, like, kind of quick example to, I guess we'll hit a couple of these is, we'll see resumes all the time of people that are applying to a non-technical job, network engineer, system engineer, whatever the case may be, and they'll have an objective that actually is the opposite of the job they're applying for, right? They'll have an objective that maybe they have a blank, a standard resume that says, really excited to obtain a position as technical manager, right? And then that same resume is getting blasted out to every non-technical job that exists, right? So we'll talk about this as we get through this a little bit further, but it's important to understand what you want. It's important to understand how you best market yourself, and be able to get yourself in front of the right people, right? So we're going to get into this concept here of, all right, now that you have your brand, now that you know, all right, this is what I'm looking to do, this is the tech I want to focus on, these are my main motivations for looking for a new position. How the hell do I go and get that, right? And Courtney is going to talk about effective resume writing. But like we said, I'm sure there's going to be questions, and we're happy to answer a lot of the questions around resume writing, LinkedIn profiles, and like I said, I'm going to wrap up with interviews. But Ed wanted us to wait till the end for questions, so we'll wrap up at the end. Cool.
So I'm Courtney. I manage our infrastructure and security recruiting team on the JobSpring partner side of the house, which is why it's orange. That's our color. I was pretty enthusiastic to present on resume writing. One, because as we discussed, I'm an English fiend. And then second of all, it's one thing that we do as recruiters a lot is format a lot of different resumes on any given day. So first thing I want to say is if your resume is on the, I guess has something that is on the don'ts side, I don't mean to offend you personally. I just see a lot of resumes. And then the second thing, which is almost annoying, is that every hiring manager, every HR person, recruiter even, is going to be really different in how they perceive a successful resume. They could want an objective, want a cover letter, but it's really, these are going to be more guidelines than actual rules, if that makes sense. Is it other this one? Cool. So the purpose of a resume is to obviously highlight relevant skills. It is the first presentation normally to a position that you want, whether it be an internal position with your current company, whether it be you're handing that off to someone who works at a company, one of your friends, and you're networking. It is the first professional summary that you usually have to give someone. So it's extremely important that it actually highlights the things that, to Evan's point, once you've sat down and really understood what you want out of your job search, you have these things right at the top. So some of these might seem really obvious, but I'll get into why they're up here. So the first thing that I thought was really obvious, but it's actually something that I probably correct the most, is including specific tech and tools that are used in your job summary. A lot of times we get trained or taught to make our resumes really achievement focused, but what my resume looks like is going to be extremely different from what y'all's resume will look like, for sure. So y'all would come out. So the main thing that I'll say is if you want a specific technology, it should be right there immediately. A lot of times it's like revenue focus, save the company this much money or something like that. That's really great and should definitely be highlighted. But if you don't have a single thing about VMware on like the first 2 bullet points, that's a big no-no. So please include that. And to Evan's point, if you have a summary as the first part of your resume instead of professional experience or something like that, it needs to have the specific tech and tools that you are working with, not like I want to be a tech manager and then just a management focused resume and you're applying for a like virtualization engineer. Like, doesn't make any sense. So the second point is kind of borderline with formatting, but it's bullet point your responsibilities from relevant to least relevant. It should probably go without saying, you should list your most recent one at the top and then go down, but just in case. But the main thing that I'll see are paragraphs underneath the specific company title that you have, and it's a lot to digest when it's in a paragraph format. If I'm a hiring manager and I have an open position and I'm even working with a recruiter that should, at least the good ones, be giving somewhat of a summary of your background to that hiring manager. The hiring manager, if they have to read 5 or 6 paragraphs, you're going to be glossed over. They're going to be misinterpreting things. So do yourself a favor. Bullet points are your friend. And it should go from relevant to least relevant. My dad has worked at IBM since ever, pretty much. He's a controller for North America Cloud Services. And he decided that he wanted to start looking for a new position after, I think, 30 odd years. And he is someone that just started writing everything down on his resume because he's been there for so long and he has so much to contribute. And so when I looked at it, it was like all over the place. So if you're someone that just needs to write it down, do yourself a favor, go back and just organize it from like relevant skills and then go down. And then if you have like a GitHub, this is more like development focused. I used to recruit for more open source development in our Chicago market, actually. And this was really, really popular to have like a link to your GitHub and things like that. Obviously, if you have like a LinkedIn, you can or cannot include that. But anything that you think would be project oriented that you would like for somebody to see right away and check you out on, definitely include that. Kind of on the do nots again, so if you currently have this, I'm sorry, but 5 to 6 bullet points really should be enough. I know that you guys probably have a ton of experience and all of the work that you do, it's hard to concise. We put it down, but 5 to 6 really relevant stuff. I see a lot of like people who put present at their current company or have like vague dates, like 2019 to 2019. Don't do that. It kind of raises eyebrows. And then another huge thing I see, if you completed coursework or you let your certification expire, don't put it on your resume. I've actually had people had offers rescinded because it was on their resume, and they actually didn't have it up to date, or they actually only completed coursework and didn't finish the degree. So that can be really, really serious. No, okay. This is more my slide. As a recruiter, this is what I focus on the most, which is like formatting. The content is definitely something that I can't obviously create for you guys. However, this is a lot of what I do on a day-to-day basis. So again, these are going to be subject to the person reading it, but the first thing first is use a professional font style. If you don't know what a professional font style is, I'm happy to answer questions, specific ones afterwards, but
No wingdings.
And no Comic Sans. If I see your resume in Comic Sans, I'm worried. Then the cool thing about Word is that they provide all these like really nifty resume templates, and they're so pretty. It's not professional. I mean, no one's gonna freak out if your name's in like blue and the rest of your resume's in black, but like, just make that black. Just make it all black. It's more professional. The amount of borders that I've had to delete off people's resumes, again, it kind of falls under like the word art thing. If you have your VCP or you have another certification, sometimes people put like the logo. Don't do that either. It kind of falls under like the word art thing. Page numbers, headers and footers. A lot of people like to put their contact information and name up in like the header, and then the rest kind of falls. Also not super professional. Again, these are very nitpicky, but when you're up against someone else, and again, it's the first presentation of your brand, your reputation, these little details actually do matter a lot. Also, if you have a professional headshot, put it on LinkedIn, not your resume. LinkedIn only. It's interesting when we get the ones with like your face right there. It's really cool, but not necessary at all.
The other thing I was going to say too is make sure that when you're saving your resume, you're aware of what you're saving it as.
Mm-hmm.
Like we actually name the file, because over the years there's definitely been some
questionable,
some interesting file names, if you will, which just something to be aware of.
That goes for your email too.
Yeah. What
does your email say? Oh, and one thing on that point too, if you're saving it, if you've been looking around since like, I don't know, 2019, maybe you're passively looking, whatever it may be, make sure if you're gonna date it, it doesn't say like 2018, because that's a red flag to some hiring managers.
We feel about putting dates on all your jobs anyway. I mean, I find I've been chopping off my older, so people can't figure out my age. It's
right.
Obvious things. There is age discrimination. Mm-hmm.
So you're asking, how far back do you go?
How far back do you go? I took off a big section on the last one.
I'm super happy you asked that, because we have a whole interactive section on it.
Better text.
Yeah, I mean texting. It'll come back. Yeah. And then making it easy to navigate. Again, if you guys have ever hired before or had to, look at a bunch of resumes, whatever it may be, you guys should know that the first thing that you look at is probably like the last two positions. So it needs to be really easy to navigate. Again, should be obvious, but list your contact information at the top, not at the bottom right corner, not on the last page, up the top, and it needs to show your location. Include a phone number. Please include a phone number. One thing I'll say is, if you are currently sitting in Philadelphia, but your dreams are to go to like Denver, California, whatever it may be, also put your desired location. There's a lot of times that we give engineers a call that are actually looking to go somewhere else, but it's just their current address that's listed. Explain any gaps or short-term contracts. One of the biggest things that I'll get questions about are, what were they doing from 2012 to 2013, or they've held like 3 to 6 month stints. What is that about? So if you can explain those, right? It doesn't have to be like some epic summary or anything like that, but if you were on a 6-month project, right, 6-month contract. And that will actually mean a huge difference between somebody who might originally skip over your resume. And then keep it concise. There's a lot of debate on how long a resume should be. The one-page concept is outdated. However, it also shouldn't be a book. When I was in grad school, we had CVs, and those are actual books, and so you shouldn't have those. The rule of thumb, I would say, is anywhere from like 3 to maybe 4, depending, pages in length. Who said wow? The amount of times I see people like freak out about their margins and it's all crammed and it's like an 8-point font because they think they need it to be like 1 page. Just make it 2. It's okay at that point. And then don't include information or work history that's not applicable to the position being applied for. I just mentioned I went to grad school. I was a marriage and family therapist before I transitioned into recruiting. Happy to tell you that story afterwards if you want to know, but if I was applying for another recruiting position, I'm not going to list that I was a clinical supervisor, right? It doesn't make any sense. I'll list that I have a master's degree, but I won't list my experience because it's not relevant to the position that I'm applying for.
In that case, if you're going for leadership,
Mm-hmm.
you don't show how long you've been in leadership.
But that adds gaps.
What?
That could add.
It wouldn't in particularly in my case, but the gaps in that case are like if you're saying if you started in IT and then did something else and then came back. I mean, you could explain like what did a different thing, but you don't want to have it to be a central focus of your resume. Makes sense? Cool. So here's your question. How far back in my career should I go on my resume? And this applies to if you like don't have as much experience. A lot of times I see internships and things like that.
So what do you have to do with this?
So you can bring up your phone, you text.
Or just go to
It's
that?
22433, and then you text Emily Crafter 870 to register, and then it'll say, "Great, you're in," and then you
I can just go to the website.
Or you can just go directly to the website and it'll pop up with
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Either way.
either way.
A lot more interaction on this question.
Yes.
I think Emily put all the comments other than Tom.
Okay, there's definitely more than 4 people in this room. 5 people. Start calling people out.
That's a consistent answer.
Yeah.
It's okay.
All right. For the non-participating people in the room, just let me know after. Won't call people out right now. Okay, so we have consistency, 10 years. 3 jobs are 15 years, and then 15 years are 3 jobs. I'm curious, you guys, before I kind of, there's not like really a right answer, which is also infuriating, but what do you guys think? 10 years, 15 years? 10 years, raise your hand. 15 years, raise your hand. In the middle, 12. I'd probably say more than 3 jobs. I would probably go back 15 plus years. Again, anything more than that, you can definitely put. But what I would highly, I guess, advise against is if your biggest summary is your help desk position from way back when, it should just be like a line or 2 at that point. So the biggest thing that I'll see is that people will just add on to their resume instead of changing it from when they first got into IT, or they'll have every co-op or internship that they've ever had still listed on there. And it really needs to be consistent in terms of showing career progression, of course, because that would be probably the number one thing that my hiring managers look for outside of relevant tech. And making sure that you are putting, if your last 3 positions are the relevant ones, they have the most content to it, if that makes sense.
What happens in the case of like your dad? He's been there 30 years. He's not supposed to have more than 6 points. But he has to go back 15 plus years.
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. So I had him essentially show a.
No, but I'm in that predicament.
I had him showcase his career development within that company. So when he first started, he was like, I don't know his title, let's make one up, financial analyst. Right. And so that had next to no bullet points next to it. It really just said financial analyst and the years that he was in it. When he went to his next step, let's say, I can't memorize his resume, was a finance manager to a senior manager to director to controller. Those were the ones that the controller, the director, and the senior manager had the most bullet points, but it was all under IBM. So almost nothing was next to the financial analyst other than the years. Does that answer your question? Well, then he decided to retire.
So it worked.
He got scared to retire.
Read your resume.
He didn't. He was like, I'm done with this. Like, yeah. He was like, I'm not having my daughter school me. Any other questions? I know we said Q&A at the end. Sorry. No, we did.
Yeah, but I think you wouldn't do that because a lot, especially with tech jobs, I find that a lot of the ages is looked at when you receive resumes. You see mostly, I think, for the most part, the majority of older people in this resume writing seminar here. And like I said, I've taken off the years of my older positions, not necessarily taken them away. Some of them I have taken away.
Yeah.
Just to get a look at it, but.
What about education? Education is gonna attach an age to it.
It's 30 years old. Who cares? Think about it.
But you mean in the day when you graduated?
Yeah, right. Your technical.
You
Your
have a
technical.
bachelor's degree from XYZ college. That's it.
Yeah.
They don't have to know when.
Yeah, you don't have to put the age.
I mean, I
of when
think
you
at the end of the
graduated.
day, I mean, look, at the end of the day, I'm sure people do it. They should not be doing that. And if they're really concerned about that, unless you're gonna, wear like a fake mustache and like, eyeglasses, like you're gonna roll through and you're gonna be who you are. I think the most important part is, which I see sometimes, is people that have worked in IT for a long time. To Courtney's point, like people just build on their resume, right? So 15 years ago, you have a whole lot about this, like, support job or network administrator job. Then you get a new position, and then maybe you don't embellish that as much. And then as people actually get more and more senior, the more and more relevant recent jobs they have are inherently set up the opposite of how it should be, right? Because they're not putting as many bullet points for those, and a lot of the highlight is on some of the further back jobs and some of the older technologies, which is why I think at the end of the day, I mean, if you can do the work, you can do the work, and if you're working with the new technology, I think that's probably the most important part. It's just making sure that you're highlighting that in your resume, and I mean, it's definitely a valid question for sure.
I agree. Where are you going to cut is in the back.
Yeah,
Not
like an inverse pyramid. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
What if you trying to go back to a position that you enjoyed previously, like you were a manager before, now you're a site engineer, reliability engineer, you want to go back to a manager, would you just highlight more of that previous experience, need more bullet points and jump the top level?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you were a previous manager, one by the title, they're going to see that you have that experience from previously. But that's also if you're only applying to management or leadership roles, you can have in your summary or objective that stating that, right? Objectives and summaries shouldn't, again, be paragraphs. There should never be a paragraph on your resume. But it can plainly state what it is you're looking for.
And you can have those resumes too. I'd say a lot of people have multiple versions of the resume if you're interested in different types of positions. So, if you have a management resume, let's say, you can make that focused on more higher level duties, right? Like Courtney mentioned before, instead of maybe starting with all the technology, you can start with, save the company this much money or led, a team of people doing X,
Yep.
Y, and Z. But again, it's important if you have different resumes, make sure you're sending the right ones to the right jobs.
And you can eliminate positions too. Like if you had a help desk in like 1999, you leave it off.
Always taking the position that every job when you write whatever you're writing for those bullets, paragraphs, it's who cares? What?
Yeah, don't put your modeling jobs.
Yeah. That's what I want to do. Yeah.
So much success there.
Who cares? Terms like that. Typically a lot of people put down supported VMware. Who cares? What did you do by supporting it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. I think we can move on then. Okay.
Sure.
And there'll be time for more questions at the end too. So the other presentation that inevitably people will look up, they'll look you up on social media no matter what. So that's probably another another presentation. But the huge part of, in addition to your resume, is your LinkedIn profile. So I'm actually going to pass this over to Kayla.
Kayla actually managed the team that Courtney's the other team in our Workbridge office that does infrastructure and security.
We're like frenemies.
Yeah. So LinkedIn profile, a lot of the things Courtney said can also go over to your LinkedIn, but there's some different things that we're going to add in. So building your profile, I think a lot of this seems very simple, but you would be shocked how many LinkedIn profiles don't have any or all of these things. I think first is to update your profile about information about what you do. I think people look at your resume as this is what I'm going to hand in an interview. This is all those details. You should be looking at your LinkedIn profile the same way. The 4 to 6 bullet points should be on your LinkedIn profile. A lot of LinkedIn profiles, people have their names and what they do, and that's it. Everything else is blank. Nothing about their actual job, just their title. And, people, a lot of times I have some managers who will be like, yeah, just send me their LinkedIn profiles. So if that's not up to date and there's nothing to send, it's not great to look at. This should be almost another form of your resume. One, because people are going to look up and find you who may not even have access to your resume. And then when people are looking at it, at your resume, they may also hop on your LinkedIn profile and they're going to want to see that it is accurate and it matches, which goes into listing accurate dates. I think on resumes, people are very cognizant of here's when I left this job, here's when I started this job. On LinkedIn, I think people guesstimate and they just put up dates and they don't match. And then again, when you're in the situation where you're interviewing or you're in process with a company and they look at your LinkedIn profile and the dates don't match, it's very confusing. I've had hiring managers catch it before. I didn't say, hey, this person has really different dates on each. What's the difference? And some people were just like, oh, I honestly just guessed when I made up my LinkedIn profile. You don't want to do that because people will check, and it is a red flag to hiring managers, and they start to question. So just make sure it's all accurate. Again, you want to put the months, not just the years, because it shows the longevity. If it's a contract, you can put contract 6 months contract or contract to hire, so they know the extent of it. I think the other thing is making sure your location is correct. When I was making this, I actually caught on my own. I went to Westchester and still had my location set to Westchester. So if I was looking for a job, I live in Philadelphia, I would want people to find me a job in Philadelphia, not an hour away in Westchester, and I wouldn't have came up in any of those searches. So just going in and checking, a lot of people make LinkedIn profiles years ago when it first came out, and then never go in and update like their actual settings. So making sure your location is correct, whether you want it greater Philly, if you want it in, out in the suburbs, put the specific suburb that you're in, whatever you would want someone to look at, like here is where I'm looking for jobs, make sure your location reflects that. It could be greater Philly area if you want it more broad. If you are like King of Prussia is where I am, I will not leave the Montgomery County, put King of Prussia, PA. It helps keep it a lot more accurate. I think the do not, it kind of goes back with it, to leave jobs outdated. Another thing people do on their LinkedIn profile is, how can I say, if you don't work at a job anymore, don't keep it till present. On resumes, people usually only do that with their most recent jobs. On LinkedIn profiles, people do with their last 3 jobs. I see so many people have 2 present on 3 or 4 jobs, and it just like, well, where do you work? What do you do? Sometimes people do consulting gigs on the side, but you want to note that. If there are 2 things you're doing, one's your full-time job, one's consulting or something that you do on the side, note that. So if there's 2 things you're doing at present, it clarifies what the difference of them is. Same thing with your resume, gaps in employment without explanation. If there are any gaps, you can put in something small or explain what there is if it is a long, period of time. If it's 1 month in between, that's not a big deal. If there's a year where you took a sabbatical or something, put something on your LinkedIn, because people look at that and will go through your last recent jobs. I think the last one, which seems silly, but not to use a selfie or an inappropriate picture on your LinkedIn. Unlike the resume, LinkedIn, you should have a picture. I would advise definitely put one up. If you have a headshot, use that. You may not have a professional headshot, but to some caliber, not one of when you're out at the bar drinking on the weekend, but a picture that you could crop and at least looks professional as it can be. People have selfies. People have some interesting pictures on there. Yeah, things that are very irrelevant. Animals, no one's looking to, I love dogs, but I don't want to see someone's dog when I'm looking. You want to see who they are, and that's what people look. Same thing, it's like your brand, you want your brand to represent you, because when people pull up that page, that picture is the first thing you see, and if it is something not great or inappropriate, that's the first reflection someone's going to get on you. They're probably not even going to make it to your jobs. They're going to be like, ooh, this is interesting, let's look at the next profile. So they're most of the things to actually build the profile, that build the brand. Next is another question. So this one's a multiple choice, so you only have to select a letter. So you could either text it in and type A, B, C, D, E, or go on that website. You guys can do that quick, and we could discuss.
This is going to be bar graph.
So you can only select one.
You can.
Wrong. How do you really feel about it? That's wrong. I'm not answering. 3 people?
Oh, wait.
Oh, look at that movement. Getting some movement.
Can everyone see the address at the top too, or would it help to write it?
Well, as they're still coming in, we will speak. So I agree that it is wrong because there are multiple right answers on this. There's not just one of these things. I would say the 3 that are relevant are specific technology, certifications, and your actual title of the job. GPA really isn't relevant. Interests, now if your interest is a specific tech, that's different, but some people put interest is, hey, I'm someone who likes to go 4-wheeling on the weekend. They're doing something like that. You don't want that in your LinkedIn title, and obviously salary preferences wouldn't. And we're going to obviously get it. So the only one that people miss were certs, which that's on the next slide, so we can talk about that a little bit. So the next one is incorporating content. So another thing we see a lot with LinkedIn profiles is people make a profile when, first found out about LinkedIn, a few years ago, and then you never touch it again. A LinkedIn profile shouldn't just be I updated my new job, I'm done. A LinkedIn profile should be something you guys are continuously editing and updating. People are looking at them all the time, and you constantly want it evolving. A resume you usually update when you're going on an interview. A LinkedIn should be something you're constantly updating with new things. One thing to do is get recommendations on LinkedIn. They're huge. It's your references, but they're right there for people to see. So if someone's, looking at your profile and see some recommendations, that's a good look. You don't have to necessarily go ask for your references, don't have to check them. Another thing I see a lot is people go on their LinkedIn, look at recommendations, like, oh, wow, he got recommended by John Smith. I know John, he's a good guy. It's kind of your references with less work. You don't have to actually get them. They don't do the phone call, and they're coming on. Also, when you look at a profile and see someone has 10 plus recommendations, that says a lot for someone to go and write these recommendations. Kind of like a review when you're looking at a restaurant. When I'm checking out where I want to go to eat, I look at the reviews. When people are looking who they want to hire, they're going to look at recommendations, because people aren't going to say stuff on there, hopefully, that are bad. They're going to recommend you. Include searchable skills. Again, I think a lot of times people don't put the bullet points or put information. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
That's actually what I was going to ask identify something, or what do you use on your side of the table?
So I think that that's a good point. Any specific technology, it's kind of the same as the resume where it says do not use irrelevant keywords. If there's a tech you maybe touched on a little bit or something, some people put all of those skills in the skill section. That's what you come up in searches. And that's when you get the messages from recruiters that are completely irrelevant, or like, why did I come up in this search? Because you may have that. You want to make sure the skill section is what you actually do and what you are, proficient in and what you do a lot of work in. And that should be listed at the skill section as well as in the bullet points. Because usually, again, when we do a search on our end, when it comes up, the keywords I search will be highlighted. So if I search VMware and someone doesn't have it in their first whole job and it's all the way at the bottom only in their skills, I'm like, oh, this person isn't a VMware person. It's not in their most two recent jobs. Where some people just may put one or two bullet points and then just think only the skill keywords is what happens. It should be in your job and in the skill keywords, not just one place.
It's about, the big part of that is SEO. The more times you can put it in there, the better. I think, not to steal the do not thunder, but, there's a lot of people that will have Novell, right? Like DOS. I mean, the things that you see, it's just like kind of crazy. So, if you think about like, somebody on the other side of the table, all right, if I was looking to hire me, like what would I be typing in as keywords? It could be, the actual title, right? Like system engineer, VMware engineer, whatever the case may be. Oftentimes, though, especially for the type of work I say most of you guys and gals probably do, the keyword searches is probably the most relevant, right? So it's going to be, VMware, virtualization, Windows, whatever the case may be. The more of those that hit, the more likely that you're going to get reached out to sooner than later. Right?
Yeah, exactly. So the next one, like the slide said, in your actual title, you want to put either your actual title, the specific technologies, and certs. And again, as relevant as it is possible. Certifications, you want to put the big ones. If you have your VCP, your CISSP, CCIE, all like big ones you would want in there. Now, if you, maybe years ago did some networking and had CCNA, you don't need to put that in your title because it's not relevant anymore. But ones that are relevant, you want to put in your title. Again, SEO, when you're doing the searches, a lot of times we search for certifications. So that's a big one. And your actual title. Now, maybe your company, like a lot of companies do, uses an interesting title that's not as, not correct. All companies use one. You can use your actual title as you feel it is on there. If you're a systems engineer and I don't know, your company calls it network admin, like some do, you can put what you feel. And that's where you can also add tech. If you do a lot of work with one tech, you could add that one in there. What I wouldn't do is some people have the tagline even under like, I'm a guru who loves the cloud or loves that. I would rather just put AWS certified. That looks better, comes up in SEO, and it looks more professional than some of the keywords people put in there. So I definitely would do that. And I think, again, putting your certs in there, but making sure they're listed on the bottom, your degrees and your certifications. Some people forget to do that on LinkedIn, and you'll go through and there isn't any degrees or certs on there. So making sure you do that. Again, making sure it's like a resume. Some people let LinkedIn kind of get pushed to the side and don't update it. Update it if you get a new cert, update it, update the dates on it. If you get a new degree, put that on there. Make sure you keep it rolling. We kind of went over irrelevant keywords. The other thing that's really big that I think people don't think of is make sure, so it's a social media platform. LinkedIn is social media. You need to be aware of what you're commenting and what you're liking. If Evan is my boss, if I am not happy with him and commenting on, oh yeah, I agree on articles about your boss being not a good boss, he's going to see that because I'm connected with him. People don't think that. Even though they may not be connected to the person you're commenting on, everyone you're connected with can see what you like and what you comment because it is a social media platform. So if you're commenting on things, there's a lot of things, sometimes people have the argument on LinkedIn, it is not social media, and people post things that are social media. If you're liking it or commenting on it, be aware that your connections, your bosses, your HR people will see those things you're commenting and liking on. So just being very aware of that. Almost like easier to figure that out than the other social media platforms. So something to be really, really cognizant of. Yeah, I think people are like, oh, I can't have inappropriate stuff on Facebook or Twitter, but your LinkedIn is just, even if you're liking something, it is going to come up. So that's more than this. The only thing, it's actually not on here, but we want to talk about is if you guys are actively looking. I don't know how many of you know about the open to new opportunities feature on LinkedIn. You could have it, and people who have the LinkedIn recruiter, like ourselves or most HR people, you can put that you're open to new opportunities, and you put specifics. If you're like, I want to move to Canada, I want to move here, you could put wherever it is, or you could be like, hey, I want a new job, but I only want it in South Jersey. I only want it in Conshohocken. You could put the actual location as well as the actual position and what you're looking for. That is confidential from your HR department. If I work at Workbridge, someone at Workbridge goes to look at mine, they cannot see I'm open to new opportunities, and only people with the LinkedIn recruiter has access to view that. So it is, if you are actively or even passively looking, it doesn't necessarily mean you're active. It can look in.
That's usually where recruiters start.
Yeah.
I would say when it comes to searching, you start with folks that are open to opportunities, and can hit up folks that aren't necessarily open on LinkedIn. You probably are still open to opportunities.
Yeah.
So if you're good, your boss will still.
No, because your boss no one in your company can see it.
Okay.
Yeah, so you cannot see, and usually your boss, unless he works in HR, isn't going to have the LinkedIn recruiter anyway. It's a special thing you pay for. But no one in your company can see it. HR just generally is the only person who has that access to that specific type of LinkedIn. So they're going to be the only ones who would see it. But if your boss does have a LinkedIn recruiter, he won't see that you're open to new opportunities as long as you work at the same company.
So you have to properly link your profile to your company for that to work?
Yes, if you do have it not linked properly or just have something on the side, that may mess it up. So just make sure you have the actual company. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What like HR recruiter profile
Mhm.
is that protected? Like, what if like the HR recruiter happened to notice that I'm looking and decided to tell my manager?
Yeah, so they should not be able to see it at your company. If you have the open new opportunities, HR or people who have the recruiter cannot see people at their own company who are LinkedIn. So I tested it like for our whole company before I came here and put it in, probably 1,200 people came up and I couldn't see anybody open to new opportunities. So out of yeah, it protects you from your own company, so it's confidential that people cannot see you looking. It's linked to the right. Yeah. So when I did it for Workbridge and JobSpring, no one came up. Now we own another company, MDI Group, that we recently purchased, and that I believe came up. I think I selected the right one, but Workbridge and JobSpring, I could not see anyone. I'm sure someone in JobSpring somewhere in the U.S. is open to new opportunities, or Workbridge, and I couldn't see any of them. And we tested it from a few people's in the office. So again,
Worst case, you'd be like, oh, should I click that?
yeah, I clicked it by accident, but yeah, anyone, as long as it's all linked correctly, it should not work. Or they should not be able to see.
You ever look for a new job?
Have I?
No.
I was like, yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't say, hey, I'm leaving. It just says open to new opportunities, which you say could mean anything. I'm open to networking. I'm open to, if you actually get there. But they should. Yeah.
Well, it usually turns off automatically, right?
No, you have to turn it off.
Cool. Well, the next, Evan's going to go back up and talk about the interview.
So we'll get into the interview here for a little bit. So hopefully at this point, we know who we are. We've got our resume, we've got our LinkedIn ready to rock, and we're generating interviews. And here we are, right? So when you think about an interview, there's really 3 parts to it, right? So there's the preparation, let's call it like the pre-interview. You've got the interview itself, and then you have post-interview. So we'll talk about those 3 pieces here. Key, definitely make sure that you do research on the company that you're interviewing with, right? Make sure that you do research on the people that you're actually going to be interviewing with also. If you happen to be going through a third-party recruiter like ourselves, we'll be able to tell you the names of the people you're interviewing with, what their titles are, right? If it's a group, if it's one-on-one, whatever the case may be. If you're going directly, right, through a company, that's still a very relevant question to ask. an HR person, right? Hey, just so I can prepare who am I meeting with, like what do those folks do? But there's a company I work with, and the very first question that they ask the person on the phone is, "What do you know about us?" Right, number one. And until I knew that, I got feedback that some folks didn't even do research to know how the company did. Right. So make sure that you know what the company does. Check out their website. Are there any, in the news updates, cool stuff going on with them? Look up the people that you're interviewing with too, right? Because who knows, maybe you worked at the same company previously, right? You might have references and folks that you've worked with prior. Maybe you went to the same school or college, right? So anything you can get to warm up the interview is obviously a good thing to have, right? So preparation, super key. The second point, preparing questions for the person they're interviewing with. I personally am a big fan of actually preparing questions and bringing them with you into an interview. I know that when I hire people to come work for us, I'm really impressed when I can see that people take the time to actually think of questions ahead of time and have thought out questions like for me personally. You're totally allowed to do that. Like bring a notebook, like write questions. Like that's going to be impressive. Like the worst thing that you could do is have the manager ask, "Hey, so what questions do you have for us?" and have nothing. Like make something up. Like don't have no questions to ask. So ideally, try that stuff ahead of time. And again, my whole thing personally is, I'd rather be overdressed than underdressed. Like unless you're told specifically, hey, this is a startup. We wear, flip flops and jeans and t-shirts to an interview. I'd recommend not doing that, right? You also don't want to wear a tuxedo and a top hat, right? So you don't want to go too far right overboard. But again, I say, you wear something that's professional for the interview. You never know who's going to pop in, right? Maybe the CEO of the company happens to be there and they drop in for the interview. Again, try to dress up, more than not. You're not going to get knocked for being overdressed. Usually, you will definitely get it for being underdressed. Do not have your cell phone volume on. I would also say just don't have your cell phone on, right? Not only is it annoying if it rings, but if it's vibrating like in your pocket and you're thinking like, oh, who's blowing me up, and it's just going to be distracting, right? So I would just say turn that off, obviously. And also do not get into a salary negotiation or ask about benefits in your first interview. There's going to be a time and a place for that. There are times, right, especially with HR folks or recruiters, if they're doing the first interview, they'll ask you, hey, so what are you looking for? Like, what sort of salary range are you targeting? Try to leave that as open as possible, right? You don't want to either limit what you could eventually get for yourself further down in the process, and you also don't want to price yourself out, right? So I always recommend leaving it open. Hey, obviously salaries are really, is obviously important to me. The more the better. However, I'm equally as interested in understanding more about the job, the responsibility, the benefits, and really the total package. So again, if the position makes sense, I'm sure we'll figure something out that is mutually agreeable, and then move on, right? Don't get into the habit of asking a lot about the company's benefits, right? Because that's stuff that we hear about too, right? Like that question I mentioned before, like, oh, what questions do you have for us? Well, what's your vacation policy? How many days can I work from home? Like, cool. They might actually have a good vacation and keep, a good work from home policy, but that's not what they want to hear in the first interview, right? So there's a time and a place. Again, second interview, final stages. That's we'll get into some more details around that in particular. So again, a lot of that's prep and in the interview itself, but make sure that you're making eye contact with the people that you're obviously interviewing with, right? So you're sitting up, you're not slouching. I mean, it's things that seem somewhat remedial, but it's mistakes that people 1,000% make. If you're doing a phone interview, please make sure that you're in a place that's quiet, where that you have good cell phone reception, right? I literally heard feedback from a client that they heard the person like flushing the toilet, like when they were in their interview, right? Literally, that was like what, a month or two ago? Yeah. Or there's dogs barking or there's kids screaming. You get the point, right? So like, if you're gonna, take the time to do an interview, like we said before, like even more than your resume, like once you get to an interview, that's really like, your first experience with a potential client. Like, make it count, Like, take it seriously. If it's a video interview, which there's more and more of those, like, dress appropriately, right, for that. If you're going on site, make sure that you bring extra copies of your resume, right? You might think you're meeting 2 people. There might be 2 more that join, right? It's good that they are able to, view everything as well. And we mentioned this on the resume, but if you have gaps in employment, it's cool. Just talk about it, right? Like, you'd rather, again, if it was me, I'd rather it come up and be able to explain, sabbatical, helping this person, got involved in this side business, whatever the case may be, versus having somebody's mind run wild with what the hell I was doing, right? For that 6 months or year period where I don't have anything written down necessarily. So it's cool to have gaps. People have them. Just bring it up, right? Not bring it up doesn't mean they're not going to know. They're gonna notice it. It's better to be proactive with that. Do not talk shit about your last company, right, or your current company. Again, that might seem kind of obvious, but when we start getting feedback from hiring managers about the things that people say, it's like, it's nuts, right? You're looking for a job. There's a reason for it. Like, people get it, right? Like, you're not happy about something or you want something that you don't have. That's cool. Just make sure that you don't throw your current or previous manager under the bus. Don't talk overly negatively about your previous company. If you didn't have a good experience, I would really practice, like, in the mirror, like, how you're going to answer that question, because that comes up in every interview you do, right? Anybody that's interviewed somebody ever, I'd say the first question or the second is, so why are you looking? And if you go off for 15 minutes about all the terrible people that you work with now and how you can't get along with anybody there, and then they're like, what about the company before you? All those people were terrible too. And how about the place before that? Like, I hated everybody there. It's like, well, maybe you're the problem, not like the people. So just important, like, you're looking for a reason. That's cool. Let's just not make it like a negative, bitch fest, if you will, right? Let's just talk about it, move on, and it is what it is. Falsifying dates, duties, or responsibilities. Don't put fake dates, right, to fill gaps. Again, companies will do background checks, and I've seen it, far too many times over the years that, people thought that they were doing themselves a solid by, stretching this job, and I started this one sooner to avoid gaps. And when a company ran a background check and that came up that the dates weren't accurate, they rescinded an offer, and I've seen that happen more than once. That goes for job applications you fill out too, right? You fill out online applications, they run the background check based off of that information, degrees, dates, again, certifications. Just make sure that everything is accurate and we're not falsifying anything there. And then the follow-up, right? I think this is huge. And I've literally had managers tell me the reason they hired people was because of their follow-up thank you note. You don't need to handwrite it, right? I would actually recommend not to do that. By the time you write it and send it and it gets to that person, that job might be filled, right? So I personally recommend, you get home from the interview, you make sure you get people's business cards, you send separate thank you notes to the people you interviewed with. Even if you tend to cover, relatively similar stuff, the last thing you want is for those folks to talk and, and they start discussing like, oh, did you get that thank you note? Yeah, so did I. Oh, what are they saying? It's like verbatim the same thing, right? If you send the same exact thank you note that's the same stuff to 3 or 4 people, probably does you more of a disservice than it's actually helping you out, right? So let's try to customize those based on the people you met with. They don't have to be, 10 paragraphs long. Thanks for the time, right? This is why I think I'm a good fit for the job. This is what I can bring to the table. This is why I'm interested. See you later, right? And connect with these folks, right? Connect them on LinkedIn, and I guess most likely LinkedIn's the main network we're going to connect with these people, because even if not now, like, you may get leads and jobs with folks you connect with down the road.
So I interviewed with David on Monday. I should automatically try to link with David. Like, sometimes you meet some people like, you're kind of a douche. Like,
Yeah.
You might be my boss. I don't get the job. Like, I kind of want nothing to do with you, actually. Like, where's the line of?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you feel that way, then you're probably not interested in working there. Then I probably wouldn't go to your way to connect with the person, right? If you actually hate them that much. But then again, you never know, because to some of these points before, like, Dave, 3 months from now might like a post that somebody in his network posted about a job that they have open, and maybe that job is a good fit for you, right? So, again, it's not like you got to be besties with him, but there might be some value in that connection. I mean, I think personally, again, I don't think that it's overbearing to go home and send a thank you note that night. Oh, I mean, I think it's kind of the same concept. Look, a lot of clients that we work with are actually scoping out candidates, like they had mentioned, like prior to the interview, right? You can see that, like, who's viewed my profile, right? I don't think that it's. I mean, as long as you know who the person is, I don't think it's a bad idea to connect beforehand. And it also shows them, like I mentioned before, that you did some research and you're scoping them out. Like, I think most managers actually think that's a good thing, right? So yeah, I would do it whenever, and I would write a thank you note the day of the interview, or like get it out right away, and let them, understand that you're excited about the job. Yep. I mean, look, I think that if it means something, you send it right away. And if you don't send it right away, then you're probably not that interested in the job, and you shouldn't send it. I think speed is key, which is why, the old school, I want to like write a letter in fancy cursive and like send it via courier pigeon, like get them the thank you note like today, right? Some companies that we're working with, they do one interview and boom, they make an offer to somebody like that day. So I had a situation recently where, 3 people interviewed, and one woman, got the business cards of everybody and proactively sent 3 people a thank you note. And the next day, the manager said it was a tough choice, but I really liked the fact that so and so followed up immediately and sent me a really thoughtful thank you note. So that's why I want to hire. That's like that actually happens.
And
Yep.
make a note of something they said in the interview.
I like to.
And then recap that.
I think it's a good idea because look, it's going to make it sound personal, right? Like the worst thing ever, which we're not going to get into cover letters and how pointless those are, but like if it's obvious that you're just sending canned messages to people, like I said, that's going to hurt you more than it's going to help. So if you write a thank you note that specifically hits on things you discussed or a topic or whatever, again, I like to just think about it like if I was, again, if I'm hiring somebody, what would I want? I would want that. I would want somebody that's sending me something I can read and be like, damn, this person actually put some effort into it. No. The woman I was mentioning? No. Yeah, no. Her and 2 other people interviewed for the same job. Nobody knew anybody. But she specifically took it upon herself to get business cards and send follow-up thank you notes to the 2 people that she interviewed with that night. The other people didn't do that. And I always recommend to people, get a business card, write a thank you note. If you want an extra pair of eyes on it, shoot it to me. I might get some stuff here and there, and you can send it off to them directly. Some people do that. Some people don't. Yeah.
Being proactive is a skill, an intangible skill that a lot of our hiring managers look for, and teammates, whether you're a hiring manager or not, will, actively talk about. So if you're able to demonstrate an intangible skill that's sought after, it goes a long way.
Yeah, it shows a communication, a comfortability, like it shows an initiative feeling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Didn't see the question.
What do you recommend for the more present and more common thing now, which is the first interview is a phone interview?
What she'd write a thank you note, you're saying?
Well, I mean, just what do you recommend? I'm sure you recommend to do something.
Yeah, I mean, I think again for me, I mean, I think that in any situation, it doesn't hurt to do more than less, right? It's the same concept. I mean, if a hiring manager does 4 phone interviews and they think, all right, all 4 of these people have the ability to do the job. Oh, but 2 showed extra initiative and actually, found my email address and shot me a thank you note. Like, again, am I going to hire somebody just because of that after a phone call? No, but I might choose, hey, I want to bring 4 people on site. I want to start with 2. Those are the 2 I'm going to start with. So again, like Courtney said before, I mean, everybody has an opinion on it. I personally feel that, without, again, I wouldn't recommend, texting the manager 75 times, right? But I think a quick, hey, appreciate the time for the call. I'm really interested in the position based on X, Y, and Z. Looking forward to hopefully getting an opportunity to meet with you. Like, see you later. I don't think that hurts, right? I think it's like I said, personally, I think the more the better. It doesn't hurt.
It's just that you are forced to send an email in that sense for the most part because you want to use this card to.
Right.
And so that you can only do that part. That's all I mean.
Well, yeah, and you could, again, you could send somebody a LinkedIn note, right? If you actually connect with them or after the interview, you'd ask. That's maybe a good time too. After the interview, send a connection request in the body. Hey, it was great talking to you. Look forward to following up. Again, personally, I think the more follow up, the better. Totally. Do you have a question too?
No, it's more of an observation. When we interview, we'll do it with a group, and we have passed over a more technical person because of things they may not have wanted or something like that, and a more team-oriented person, and said we'll take the lesser of the two because of attitude or overconfidence or something like that, or somebody saying I don't want this, and you're like, yeah, that's not going to work.
Right, it's not going to work here. And look, I think the other thing too, if you're going to write a thank you note, like make sure the grammar's correct. You know what I mean? Like, again, these can also bite you in the butt if you do them and you don't put the same attention to detail as you do like in your resume or LinkedIn, right? Because I've also received, hundreds of thank you notes over the years, and it's like, thank God this person sent it to me first. Because if they didn't, and this went right to the hiring manager, like, it's just not a good representation of what that person is about. They're sometimes rushing to get it out real quick and, catching spelling errors and all sorts of stuff. So, keep the same attention to detail. Again, don't lose contact with the person you're interviewing with. That's why I think it's important you connect. I mean, you never know where your paths may cross down the road. I personally connect with, candidates that we're representing frequently. And when I see down, that they are looking for new positions, I get that LinkedIn update. It's like, oh, wow, like that person's looking for a job. Hopefully we can help them out, right? That hiring manager that you interview with today might take a job at a company that you're really interested in, a year or two from now. And having those connections is never a bad thing. And obviously, I mean, it kind of goes without saying, but don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? Like, don't shut down your interview process. Just because, right, you had an interview, obviously don't quit your job. Definitely don't quit your job just because you had an interview. And more importantly, I'd say, sign an offer letter, but like all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, right? If the company does a background check, right, they do a credit check and they do drug, whatever, like don't give your notice until you get clearance from the company that you are 1,000% good to go, right? Again, I've seen instances where somebody was mistaken for somebody else, or somebody had an issue with their credit like 20 years ago, and that's coming up in checks that companies are doing now based on the industry that they're in. So again, I'm all about like just making sure that it's like airtight. Like, do not give your notice until you get clearance from the company that you're 1,000% good to start. So wait, what's the question? What do I consider? What, when you're good to go? Yeah, so I think it depends on, what other checks and balances a company has, right? So when you're going through the interview process, you could ask, great, what else needs to happen? I mean, this is what we ask, like, what needs to happen to be able to make an offer to have somebody start? And usually they'll say, to make an offer, we need to get, the green light from the hiring manager. We need, 2 or 3 references checked, whatever the case may be. In order to start, they then, once they sign the offer letter, we start a background check. Once the background check clears, then they could start. Cool. If you're working, don't give your notice until everything's clear. It's important to know what that is, though, right? So we work sometimes with tech companies that are there's a client I work with that's a tech company in the finance space, and they do a crazy credit check. So somebody that had a bankruptcy 15 years ago, right, for even good reason, is going to get flagged, right? And I've seen instances where that company has had to rescind offers based on SLAs with clients. They don't care, but like their clients care. So just wait till wait till somebody tells you that there's nothing else that needs to happen in order for you to be okay to start.
Now, during the interview process, if you're a lot of people are asked like, tell me about yourself. Where do you say take that?
It's the like most annoying question of all time. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of like, oh, what are your weaknesses?
I can take it personally.
Yeah.
I can take it professionally. You know, if I see one of the interviewers wearing a Mickey Mouse button, I can take it to Disney World. You know, and have them talking about it. It's like, where do we take this? You know.
I think that it's kind of like a feel you're gonna get from the person that you're talking to, right? And I think, look, more than ever, I think, the technical ability is great. I think that the ability to work well with people and the intangible skills are really important. I think people actually nowadays like care what people like to do, right? I mean, people are definitely included more proactively in resumes and LinkedIn and whatnot. So I think you could probably take it both ways and say, hey, so from a professional perspective, like this is, what I like to do work wise, and I'm interested in this technology, and I build a lab in my house and all that kind of stuff. Oh, and for fun, I do whatever, right? Whatever that might be. I think it's good to show that you've got, both sides, right? And you're well rounded. I think, hiring managers want that out of employees, probably.
They also want you to be genuine. So not to turn your own question against you, but if you're orienting your answer based on that person, that's usually what we call a recruiting preference. So like when I hire for my team too, like I want to know, why they're interested, what they have done professionally that's going to qualify them. But I also want to understand a bit about who they are as a human. That's not going to be the rule of thumb for every single hiring manager to Evan's point. However, you should be genuine.
Yeah, people are going to appreciate that. And people can also read through it, if you're not, if they just feel like you're telling them what they want to hear. Bingo. That was easy, right? So I think we mentioned that already. There's a time and a place to talk about salary and benefits. It's obviously not the first interview.
The question on that, though, the salary is, a lot of times, right, your first interview is with that HR person. And they want to make sure that you're playing in the same playground, right? So they say, what is your current salary?
They're not allowed to say that. Well, in certain counties, that's actually illegal to ask people now. Philadelphia, it's not legal in Philadelphia. We can ask people what they want to make because that's relevant, so we know what jobs to obviously tell them about. But no, actually, I think that legislation just passed in Philly recently, Philly in particular. That if the company, all right, so if the company is actually in Philadelphia, I think it's New Jersey too, right? Or if they're in New Jersey, they're not allowed to ask you what you're currently making, and that's applications. That's in an interview. Now again, you're gonna say like that's illegal, like you're not allowed to ask me that. Yeah, you could say that. You could say it's private. You could say it's not relevant. I think I didn't even let you finish your question.
No, because like you said, I'm not. The reason I'm talking to you about the job is not only because of salary.
Correct.
But it would be good to make sure that we are playing in the same playground, right? Because I'm making $100,000 now, and we get into the third interview, and I find out that this job is offering $45,000 for a senior network engineer.
Well, we'll never fill that, obviously.
I'm like, wait a minute, I thought you said this was a senior.
Well, look, I think there's a couple things. One, again, not to just say the recruiters are the shit, but like if you use an agency to help you get a job, like they're going to be able to tell you, hey, here's the range. Now it's up to the company to ultimately decide what they're going to pay you, right? Just because this is the range doesn't mean they're going to offer you that. I mean, that's what the interview is for. But third parties in general can tell you that, right? I think that most, not all, but a lot of job postings often will list some level of a range. And quite frankly, I don't know. I mean, I think I've seen it a lot of times where if a company really likes you, if we're not that far off, like they'll figure out a way to make it work, right? Now, with that being said, I think it's definitely relevant to ask that. Let's say You do a first round phone interview, and it's through a company directly. And the HR person, the recruiter calls you, and let's say you don't know what the salary range is. Um, if they're calling you to schedule like a second or on site or whatever, I think it's certainly appropriate to say, hey, just so we're on the same page. I know the job description didn't say a salary range, so what is the range for the job? And let them tell you what the range is versus you telling them what you're looking for. Because you might say, yeah, like I really need 100K, and that might be like, oh, we could have paid you like 115, but good to know that you're looking for 100.
You're willing to settle for less.
Yeah, so it's like any negotiation, right? Like the person that talks first loses, so let them talk and let them tell you what the range is. And again, if they're like, well, what are you looking for? I mean, go back to what I said before, like it's going to depend on the job, responsibilities, the benefits, the 401K, like the total package. So.
And it does.
100%.
If you're telling me that you want me to be responsible for 10 people reporting to me, well, that's different than not having.
Right, totally.
Reporting to me.
I think it's appropriate to ask. I just wouldn't do it in the first interview. Like, do the first interview, get them to want you and be interested in you, and then you've got some more leverage too.
No, but there's a big difference between not managing anyone and managing 10. You know what I mean? Right. So.
Right, you'd expect to be compensated more with the
Right,
increased responsibility.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, you look at some of the job postings they're looking for a lot of skills, and then you get down there and you're like, wow, it's paying 40.
Well, the thing to keep in mind too is oftentimes the people that are writing the job descriptions aren't the people that are filling the jobs, right? And they're outdated. The job descriptions, they've been recycled for like the last 10 years. So you take that for a grain of salt.
Also, their wish list.
Correct.
Because there's a good chance that they can list 10 things on there. They're only looking for 3. They like, yeah, if we get extra, bonus for us. But now from my friends are recruiters, I've seen this. What comes across your side of the table, and there's some that we want 15 years of experience with the technology that came out 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Good luck on that one.
That was all the cloud. We went, 10 years of AWS is like cool. It's been off like 3 years. But look, it's the same concept of like in your resume, you want to have like keywords. So like they'll put all sorts of shit in there, and they don't necessarily need all of it, right? And again, there's a lot of times where companies hire attitude more than they do like the actual technical skill. If they feel like someone is eager to learn and is going to be a good team player. Look, I mean, I tell my clients this all the time. Like, you don't want to hire somebody that has everything that you're looking for because they're going to get in there and they're going to be bored, right? Like, it's the best case scenario is you hire somebody that has, a lot of what you have, but that's going to be able to take a job and learn because someone that's learning is going to stay, right? I mean, I'd say probably the number one reason, other than someone that's laid off, that someone's looking for a job is like they're bored, especially in tech, right? It's the same. You're doing the same shit over and over again. You're like, I want to use like some new stuff. I want to learn some new technology. So we try to advise clients like, don't look for the person that has everything because they're going to be out of there in the next like 6 to 12 months. That's usually the case. So anyway, we got some key takeaways, and we can open up some more like Q&A to the three of us here. But Kayla and Courtney had mentioned, just realize that like, across all of your social platforms, and that's LinkedIn. I don't think no one's using Twitter, it sounds like, but Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, like people will find you. People will Google you. Like we will 100%, and clients will too. So again, whether it's liking weird comments, right? I know we had a client that noticed that this candidate left just like terrible Yelp reviews on every restaurant that he went to, like that's how in depth they went. And they're like, man, this is an angry person. Like, I don't know if we want that person on our team. Like, they will find all sorts of shit, right? So just keep that in mind. Clean some of that stuff up, right? If you're not looking for a job, you probably don't care, right? But when you start to, just realize that like your history, like it's there, right? And it's never going anywhere. You want to make sure that as you're like branding yourself, you're doing your best to put your best forward and try to eliminate as much of that stuff as possible, right? Were you guys gonna? No, okay, cool. So we talked about highlighting relevant skills, achievements, certifications, right? Anything that could, differentiate you from other people, right? So if you're, involved in training, great, like put it on your resume. If you go to meetups and stuff like that, like put it on your LinkedIn profile. If you have certs, put them there. I'd say more so if they're still active, but it doesn't hurt to have stuff to get, SEO out there. But you want to highlight things that are the most relevant for what you're personally looking for in your search. We talked about, this SEO. You want to have as many relevant keywords as possible and recommendations. Again, like Kayla had mentioned, like if we are doing searches for specific jobs, it comes up by relevance, and that's where we start, right? So think about what someone that's looking for you is going to be typing in as a keyword, and make sure that you have that all over your profile and all over your resume, right? And in your title, if it makes sense, in the body of your profile and the skills section, whatever. You want to have technology all over your resume. And lastly, just make sure that when you're going to an interview, you're polished, you're prepared. This is your opportunity to present yourself to a client. And the follow-up is really, really important too, right? Like I said, like we have the ability to see the results, right? And we literally see people get jobs because of their follow-up, right? So do it quick, concise, right? Make it specific to the person you talk to. And if you do these things, hopefully, it'll put you in a good position to land the job that you're looking for. So that was it. I don't know if you guys had any other, questions. I know that we also said, again, if people have like hard copies of a resume that they want to get another eye on, we're happy to do so. We have like 1 or 2 laptops that if you wanted to like pull up your LinkedIn and get some like critique, we're more than happy to do that.
We also have our cards out there.
Yeah. But I don't know if there's any other questions. Sure.
We were talking about